What do you do in the week between the Derby and the Preakness? Easy. You cap the card at Belmont. Let's cap the card on Man of War Day. Salutations and welcome, friends, to another episode of Capping the Card. I am your host, Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. And before we get into all the introductions, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who tuned in last week for our Capping the Card on Kentucky Derby Day. Had over 7,500 views and people checking us out. Really appreciate it. Obviously, Derby fever hits everyone. And the good news was we were able to return a positive ROI on the day for our top picks, which I believe returned a flat $2.33 return on a $2 win bet. So, hey, better than losing money, right? So we were able to connect you with some winners on the day, and that was always a good sign. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hopefully, some of you are coming back and are going to become repeat viewers of Capping the Card. But if this is your first time, the premise is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go races 1 through 11, cap the card, and give you my top pick, top value play in every single race. We're going to try to do it in about 30 minutes. This week, I'm going solo, but next week, we're going to have a special Black-Eyed Susan Day capping the card and Preakness Day capping the card. I'll have special guests for both of those days. Now, before we get any further, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to make sure to get all of our content here on Trust the Profits. We have capping the card. We got doubling down. We got Preakness spotlight videos coming out. We got full field rundowns. We're even doing previews of the Victoria Mile over in Japan and the return of Sadashi. Listen, folks, we got you covered on horse racing. Doesn't matter if you are an international player, a domestic player, if you're into handicapping, live betting, news and updates, we got you covered. So press that subscribe button. Additionally, like this video and comment below with who you think is the best bet on Saturday's card at Belmont Stakes Day. So listen, the good news when we look ahead at Belmont is the weather looks lovely, which is something I've not been able to say about New York in about 4 months. So that's great news. We should be on the turf there. We shouldn't have any issues. That's, I think, great news for Saturday's racing conditions, not having to worry about the weather. Always a little bit of a sigh of relief when you can let your hair down and do that. What I'll say about this card, though, before we get into race 1, is from approaching this card, I feel like the second half of the card is where you can get a little bit more prices. You get more prices. I think the front half of the card is a little chalky. But that said, I think there are a couple of very spready races early on. There aren't a lot of free squares in this card. I'll be honest. There doesn't feel like there's a lot of singles anywhere. It feels like a lot of very honestly contested races. Maybe you go 2 deep in a couple of horizontals, maybe 3 deep, and just try to stick to that and, 2x5 structure or 3x5 structure or something along those lines. Those are still going to be pretty expensive tickets. But like I said, not a lot of singles, I don't think, on this card. But at the same time, there are a few races early on where you spread, but I do think the picture gets a little clearer later on in the card. But let's dive into race number 1, and that is a $16,000 starter allowance going 6 furlongs for 4-year-olds and up. And as I mentioned, I think the first part of the card is a little chalky, and we start here with the favorite as my top pick in race number 1, the number 5 horse, Colonel Bowman. This is a horse 6-5 in the morning line for David Jacobson and picks up Irad Ortiz Jr. on the mount. Huge jockey upgrade. Obviously, Irad already off to a hot start at the Belmont meet. Not surprising. And here's the thing. This horse just makes way too much sense. Really towers over the field from a speed figure standpoint, as well as just from a class standpoint. This horse has won 4 of its last 5 races. And the only time he didn't win was a pretty close up 3rd place in between. He's won 2 races at the starter allowance level. He's actually coming out of a $25,000 optional claimer of Penn National that he won by 3.5 lengths. He was at Oaklawn before that. So he's been on a really solid circuit since he's come to David Jacobson's barn 3 races ago. He's run really, really well. Like I said, picks up the top jockey. He's going to be forwardly placed. There's just a lot to like here about Colonel Bowman. I think makes the most sense as a very logical favorite at 6-5 on the morning line. Now, in terms of my value play, I will give you a little bit of a price at the number 7 horse, All Cools or Al Cools, 8-1 on the morning line. This is a son of gemologist and just a really honest horse. And even though 29 career races, 13 for 29 in the exacta. So top two just about half the time. Here's the thing at Belmont, 4 wins in 6 career starts, 4 for 6 winning, 5 for 6 in the exacta at Belmont. When you look at this distance, 5 for 6 in the money, 4 for 6 in the exacta. This is a horse that just runs his race, is very, very honest, has run decently at this starter allowance level, hasn't necessarily gotten the wins there yet, but has gone up in class. I really was impressed by that last effort. Granted, it was on a sloppy sealed track, but he's run well on dry fast tracks too, so there's no concern there. But that was I thought, a really nice effort in a $62,000 optional allowance optional claimer. So taking a step down in class, back down to allowance 16, I usually like that move of, maybe this horse has been running at this level for a while, then really takes a big step up, runs halfway decent, and then drops back down. I tend to find they run pretty well when they come back down in class a little bit. So that's the one I'm going to be going with in race number 1. Listen, there's a few other horses that are of worth noting, I think, in this race. Certainly Ragtime Blues makes a little bit of sense at 7-2. You're not getting much value there, though, which is why I wanted to move past that horse. Trainer's also 2 for 16, moving from claiming to allowance level races. So willing to move past that one. The Rudy Rodriguez horse, Airport, 12-1 on the morning line, could provide some value, but I think he's going to fade coming late. And I don't see the inside horses doing much. And then the number 8 horse for Patrick Reynolds, that's a horse exiting Linda Rice's barn. That's never a very strong winning move. Horses are only winning at a 13% clip after leaving Rice's barn. So it just didn't feel like there were a lot of other ways to go here in race number 1. Let's move to race number 2 on the card, which is a first of a few turf races on the card for the day. In fact, the first of 6 turf races on the card. That's always really exciting, I think, to get back on the turf here after being away from it so long in New York. And listen, my top pick here, and this is kind of an interesting race in my opinion, is the number 9, 02035. It was 5-2 in the morning line, is second choice for trainer Rob Atras with Manny Franco aboard. Here's why I just feel like this is such a good spot for 02035, who is a horse I like saying that name over and over again, but it's just a really honest horse too. 8 for 16 in the money. And this is a horse that's been running against stakes level competition, ran in the Gio back in November, is coming back from a long layoff, and was previously trained by George Weaver, now in the Atras barn. Again, that's a barn that can heat up really quick in New York. We saw that certainly over during the Aqueduct meet, and is 21% on the trainer switch. Does well in these sorts of turf sprints, does well coming off the layoff. There's a lot of things to point to Atras being a good trainer for this particular horse. Like I said, I just like the spot that this horse is in. He's run against grade 2 company before, stakes level company, always runs honest. Listen, he does not win much. I know that. 1 for 16 winning. I get it. But this horse is always around there, and I feel like this is the right level of competition this horse should be facing. So I just feel like this is a really good spot. The horse has been training very nicely in the mornings, a nice 48-1 workout on May 1st at Belmont. So I think there's a lot of good things there. And this horse is getting Lasix. If you go back and look through the running lines, this is a horse that does not get Lasix very often, now gets Lasix in this spot and tends to run pretty well on Lasix. So I'm going to use this horse here. And listen, I'm going to be fading the number 8 Bold Journey, who's the favorite 2-1 for Bill Mott. This horse has never been on the turf before. Mott is only 1 for 30 going dirt to turf for the first time in allowance races in New York. He just doesn't have great turf stats, and he doesn't have great turf pedigree when you look at this horse in particular. So I know he's run against big time competition, running in the Gotham, running in the Carter last time out, and running halfway decent against Doppelganger and Repo Rocks in that race. But taking to the turf, I just don't necessarily trust it. I'm going to play against the number 8 Bold Journey. That's why I'm going to use 02035 as my top pick. Now, in terms of a value play, I absolutely love the number 3 horse Elusive Edge here for Michelle Hemingway, Junior Alvarado aboard. This is a horse that's run well at the lower levels and then had about an 18-month layoff, 16-month layoff. Came back April 20th and ran in a pretty, an $82,000 level allowance race. And so, nice level allowance race and ran respectably. Ran sixth that day, but only 5 lengths back. Picks up junior now, second time off this really long layoff. This horse has something. If you go back and look, this horse's best effort, you could argue, was going 7 furlongs. Really liked this distance before. 4 for 11 in the exacta into this horse's career. 3 for 6 in the exacta in this horse's career on turf. This horse started on the dirt. I think you can toss a lot of those forms. When you look at how this horse has performed on turf, there's some things that make sense there. This horse will want a little bit of pace to run into, but at 7 furlongs, I actually like the distance. I think the distance hits this horse right between the eyes. Like I said, one of his best career efforts at Belmont on the turf, going 7 furlongs back in September of 2021. That's only 4 races ago. This might be a 6-year-old, but only 11 career races. Like I said, that 16-month layoff kind of delayed things a little bit. Second time back from that. I'm going to use this horse underneath Elusive Edge at 8-1. Well, let's move to race number 3 on the card, which is a $25,000 claimer. Non-winners are 3 lifetime with some conditions attached, going a mile. And this is, again, this is a very spready race, in my opinion. A very, very, very spready race. I ultimately landed on the favorite 42 Ace. 5-2 for Charlton Baker with Joel Rosario aboard. Part of it is this horse just runs well. 6 for 9 in the exacta at a mile with 2 wins. Only 2 efforts against open company, which is what this is. This horse largely runs in state restricted and state bred races, but only 2 times this horse ran against open company was a $50,000 starter allowance, won that race, and a $50,000 claimer non-winners of 3 lifetime ran second by a length in that race. So when this horse has run against open competition, has run well, and those were higher level races than what this horse is running against now. One of the things I love to do, if you ever use Timeform US, one of the things they do is they assign a numerical value to how good races are that horses have been running in. And they assign a numerical value to the race for this particular day. In the instance of 42 Ace, quite frankly, he's just been running in races that are like 10 to 15 points better than the race that he's running in today. Like I said, if you use Timeform US, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it's an interesting tool. It's one of the things I really like about Timeform that they use there is the ranking of these races and the numerical values that they provide. I think that's really helpful, particularly maybe for people starting off handicapping. But I'm just going to use this horse. This feels like a very spready race, but I do think that he's kind of heads and shoulders the favorite from a class standpoint. Now, listen, in terms of where am I going to go for my value? I'm going to go to the number 3, Midnight Worker, with Javier Castellano aboard. This is a horse, really solid numbers, honestly, especially when you look at the claiming level races that this horse has been running in. Several races back at Aqueduct in the 25,000 non-winners of 2, wins that race, then goes to several starter allowance races, runs halfway decent, comes back 2 races ago, goes a mile in a $25,000 non-winners of 3, nearly gets the job done, just loses by 3/4 of a length to Colloque, who's a nice horse actually in one of the later races on the day. And so, again, this horse, 4 for 8 in the money at this distance, has run well at this level of the kind of, non-winners of fill in the blank claiming level. It's when he steps up into starter allowance races that you see this horse falter a little bit. Listen, there were some expectations behind this horse at one point. This is a horse that ran in the grade 3 Futurity, ran in the grade 3 Nashua. This is a halfway decent horse. So I think that this is a horse that can get something done and finish underneath in what feels like a very spready race. I will say, if you're looking for an even more of a price, the number 4 horse Centavo at 8-1 in the morning line, a little bit to like there, I think, as well. A very similar profile, I would actually say, to Midnight Worker, and actually finished behind Midnight Worker last time out, but very similar profile in that when this horse drops down to the claiming ranks, tends to run pretty well. It's when they're in the starter allowance ranks that you see that record get kind of muddied up a little bit. So always important to look at the conditions of the races these horses are going to be in. Well, let's move to race number 4 on the day. And there's the aforementioned Colloquy, who I said was a horse that I liked a little bit later on in the card. It was actually the next race. My top pick in this one, and this is a $50,000 starter allowance going a mile and a 16th for 3-year-olds and up. And my top pick in this one is mandatory on the inside rail, 3-1 on the morning line for John Kimmel. This horse just feels like the speed in the race and should be sitting right on or very near the lead. The mile and a 16th at Belmont, remember, is still a one-turn race. Something important to keep in mind. So we're not going 2 turns. It's still a one-turn race in this instance, which I actually think suits this horse rather well. This is a horse that actually got DQ'd last time out, crossed the finish line first, but like I said, got moved back to second. I tend to actually like horses coming back from that because, especially when they're kind of staying at the same condition level, which last time out was at a starter allowance 50 as well. The last 2 times have been at that level. And guess what? You had second place by a length and then a win in which was DQ'd back to second place. So this horse has been performing well at this level and roughly at this distance. Those last 2 were at a mile. Now we're going a mile on the 16th. I don't think that's disqualifying for mandatory coming from the number 1 post. He'll be aggressive out of the gate. He can break well. Shouldn't have any issues coming out of the chute in that regard. So that's going to be my top choice. For my value play, I'm going to go to the number 3 Colloquy, 5-1 on the morning line for Tom Morley with Jose Torres aboard. Listen, I know the race 2 back was not great, and that was against some of the similar competition. But if you go back and look, the race 3 races ago actually beat mandatory in a race. And so I kind of like that a little bit, to be honest with you. And there's a horse that actually broke its maiden going a mile and a 16th at Belmont. So is familiar with this distance, this route, this and this track, obviously. So Morley also pretty good off the claim. This horse was claimed from Robert Falcone's barn. So 22% from Morley off the claim in dirt routes. Here's the real kicker. In allowance level company, under those conditions, he's actually 5 for 8 in the money. This horse feels like an automatic play underneath for me. It just feels like a horse that is going to run a really honest race. And if this is a horse that's been pretty good form, had a little bit of a hiccup after breaking its maiden, I think kind of getting acclimated to running against winners. But those last 4 or 5 times out have been really honest efforts. I think you're going to get a strong effort from Colloquy in race number 4 on the card. And I think you can get a little bit of value there in that particular race. But what I will say is both races 3 and races 4, if you're playing horizontally, really feel like spread races. Those feel, I have my top pick. Yes, I have my value play, but I think there's 3, 4 other horses you could make a legitimate argument for, in particularly those 2 legs of any sort of a pick sequence that you're playing. Well, let's move to race number 5, which is actually the first of the graded stakes races on the card. And this is an exciting grade 1 Man of War stakes going a mile and 3/8 on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. And this features a Charlie Appleby monster coming over. Warren Point, 9-5 favorite. This is a horse that is really hard to get around. 8 for 8 lifetime in the money, 5 for 8 winning. Came back, won a stakes race over in Bahrain back in February, wheeled back on 2 weeks rest and nearly won a grade 1 race in Qatar. And that's all you kind of have to know. This horse hasn't run since February 18th. It should be well rested, has come over here, and more importantly, has gotten a workout in over the Belmont turf. That happened on May 7th, ran a 1 minute, basically a minute and 4, 5 furlong work. That's how you get the words out, Matthew. But a minute and 4, 5 furlong work gets Frankie Dettori aboard. Listen, typically when it comes to Charlie Appleby, I'm just betting his horses because when he brings them over from Europe, they're just better than what we have here. That might be lazy handicapping on my part, but it's been tried and true, quite frankly. And even from a handicapping standpoint, this horse has been running against better company than what we have here. We should be able to get the distance, no problem. 9-5, if you get it, in my opinion, is a gift. And I love that he gets Frankie aboard. Now, sometimes with Appleby, I do like to pay attention for when he brings Buick over for certain weekends. This doesn't feel like a let's bring William Buick over type of a weekend in terms of he doesn't have multiple mounts for him, which is usually what is the indicator of whether or not he brings Buick over. But I like that he has a traditionally European style turf jockey in the irons on Warren Point, who can be a little bit of a handful to deal with, but has been very successful under multiple jockeys. So really like this one a lot as my top pick in this race. Just feels kind of automatic. Now, this is a nice field, though. We should say you got Red Knight in this field. You got Channel Maker. Everybody loves the 9-year-old. You have a horse like House Street that's kind of young and maybe developing, might be able to take a step forward. Soldier Rising, Strong Tide, Value Engineering, a horse I just can't trust at 12-1. I kind of wanted to use him as my value play, but I just never know what version of Value Engineering I'm going to get. Therefore, my value play is going to be a horse that actually won last time out in a big spot at the Elkhorn, and that's the number 4 Verstappen at 6-1 for Brendan Walsh with Declan Cannon. I do wonder if this horse is going to take some money, or if this horse is going to float. And the reason I bring that up is, there's some other big time connections in this race. You have Christophe Clement and Jose Ortiz with Soldier Rising. Obviously, you have some Mike Maker horses here with Irad aboard and Red Knight, and even Value Engineering with Manny Franco aboard another Mike Maker horse. I wonder if those horses take a little bit of money. And Verstappen is a horse that's coming in from the outside, is not traditionally run in New York, has never run in New York before, maybe floats up a little bit from 6-1, but it's a horse that won the Elkhorn last time out and seems to have found his form on the Turfway Park synthetic. This horse was a decent enough turf horse, went to Turfway though, and seemed to figure something out. Since going to Turfway, has won 3 of his last 4. The only loss was in the Kentucky Club Classic to Wolfie's Dynaghost, who's a very nice horse, particularly on the synthetic. And then came back after that race, won the Grade 2 Elkhorn, out kicking Red Knight at the very end at Keeneland, going 1.5 miles. I know this horse can do the distance. This horse seems to have found whatever it was looking for, found another gear. 6-1, I'll gladly take this horse, use this horse. If I'm going to use it underneath, I'll use it in an exacta with Warren Point. And I think this horse may even have a shot at an upset. So, like I said, really like Verstappen in this spot. I think I'm always looking for kind of newer horses on this turf marathon circuit. Verstappen fits that bill. 6-1, you're getting an honest price on a horse that's a proven graded stakes winner. Let's move to the Peter Pan Stakes, which is another graded stakes race on the card, grade 3, going 1 mile and an eighth. And here's the point in the card where everything turns, I feel like, where we start to go from chalk to we can get past chalk maybe a little bit. And so in this particular race, I'm fading the chalk, which is the number 9 Bishop's Bay for Brad Cox, 8-5 in the morning line. Listen, he's done nothing wrong. He won his maiden over first mission. What has first mission gone on to do? Oh, nothing. Just win the grade 3 Lexington. And is probably going to be either second or third choice, I would imagine, at the Preakness Stakes this next weekend. Then you look at what he did next time out. Beats a horse like Demolition Duke and First Defender. 2 very nice horses. Here's the thing. This horse doesn't win with style necessarily, and also took a step back in speed figures. Ran a 97 Beyer first time out. Then at 6 furlongs, stretches out to 1 mile and 70 yards. And speed figure goes from 97 down to 88. And this horse hasn't blown anybody away exactly. This horse hasn't always defeated his competition the way that he is bet to defeat this competition. Meaning, in debut, he was a 1-2 favorite, won by 3/4 of the length. Last time out, he was a 2-5 favorite, won by a neck. He doesn't necessarily blow horses out. And if you're going to get an 8-5 favorite in the Peter Pan, quite frankly, I want to see a horse in his first 2 races that's blowing people out of the water. Listen, Brad Cox's barn is always very good, very live. Florent Giroux and Brad Cox on a big day, always very serious. But I'm going to try to get around this horse. And the horse I'm going to use is actually kind of an interesting one, which is Classic Catch, 9-2 in the morning line for trainer Todd Pletcher with Irad Ortiz Jr. in the irons. Here's what I like about this horse. Blinkers going on. This is a horse that broke its maiden against a horse like Krupe, who I have a lot of respect for, and then ran third in a race that featured Prairie Hawk and Groveland, 2 really nice horses, comes back, wins the next time over a horse like Mr. Ripple, who's, I think, a halfway decent horse, and then last time out ran in the grade 2 Wood Memorial. Finished 5th that day in a 12-horse field and was 5.5 lengths back. But here's the thing. This horse started dead last and was 11th at first call, and was 7.5 lengths back, 10 lengths back halfway through the race, closed into that speed a little bit, did it off of Lasix, did it while carrying more weight. I just think there's a lot till upside here with this particular horse. This is a horse that's 2 for 3 winning at 9 furlongs, something that Bishop's Bay has not yet done. So I like the fact this horse can absolutely get the distance, has won when he was favored the one time in that $75,000 optional claimer over Mr. Ripple. And like I said, I just think this is a horse that is progressing from a speed figure standpoint as well. 78, 82, 85 the last 3 times out. Gets Irad aboard. The blinkers on. This horse should be much more forwardly placed. That seemed to be the issue the last time out. If this horse is a little bit more, assertive, I think this Classic Empire colt can really get the job done. We just saw, obviously, Angel of Empire, another Classic Empire progeny, run very, very well in the Kentucky Derby. So don't have any issues with the distance here. I'm going to use Classic Catch as my top pick in this race. And then for a value play, listen, I want to give a shout out to the number 1 horse, Arcangelo. 10-1 on the morning line. Second back from a layoff. This horse actually ran in a maiden against Kings Barnes second time out. So there's been some tough competition along the way. Just broke his maiden last time. He's not my official value play, but I would not be shocked if this horse hit the board. The connections are not known for getting them ready for this type of a spot. 0 for 7 at Belmont, 1 for 19 in stakes races. Not the greatest for Jenna Antonucci, but this horse I feel like has some potential and it could run a big race for Javier Castellano. So just keep an eye on that one as a horse I like a little bit there as well. But ultimately, my value play is the number 4 Summer Cause, also 10-1 on the morning line for Christophe Clement. This is a horse that ran halfway decent in the Tessio Stakes last time out against Perform, who's going to be running in the Preakness Stakes, and 99% Maddie, who is, I think, a nice horse as well. Now, you could say this horse is going off Lasix, but here's the thing. This horse actually ran pretty well on Lasix in the first 2 races of this horse's career. Ran against Tapit Trice, ran against Slip Mahoney, ran against some really nice horses, actually finished ahead of Tapit Trice in his debut race. So this horse has some class to him, has some expectations, Triple Crown nominated. He's very consistent, I would say. The speed figures aren't going to necessarily overwhelm you, although he did run an 83 last time out, which was halfway decent. But this horse is 2 for 2 hitting the board at this distance with 1 win. I just think at 10-1, connections that you trust with Clement and Franco, I'm going to take a shot with this horse who just ran a minute and 2 5 furlong bullet on May the 5th. So this horse clearly feeling very good coming out of that April 15th Tessio race, which I think was a pretty live race. And I've rewatched that race a few times. Really liked that race. Thought Summer Calls almost got there at the end too, and almost got the win. So really like that one a lot as a value play in the Peter Pan. Well, let's move on to my favorite type of race, which is $40,000 maiden claimer going 1.16 on the turf for 3-year-old and up. And these are state breds, baby. So this is really my wheelhouse. This is where I like to start picking out some prices, and this is when I really like start playing against the favorites in particular. And this is, I think, another kind of field where you can potentially get a little bit of a price, but ultimately I landed on the number 8 Silent Running at 5-1 as my top pick for James Harold Bond with Flavian Pratt aboard. What I will say is that if for some reason the 13 horse, who's also eligible, Mama Band Me. Okay. If the 13 horse draws into this race, also 5-1 on the morning line, that horse makes a ton of sense. Okay. I don't usually consider AEs when I'm doing capping the card just because you never know how things are going to shake out. The fact this is on the turf and the weather's supposed to be fine, I don't know if they're going to get to the AEs or not. If the 13 draws in, that's a very legitimate horse if they can figure out the trip from that 13 post position. But listen, my top pick, ultimately, Silent Running 5-1, coming back from a layoff, hasn't run since New Year's Day at Aqueduct. Okay, so coming off a little bit of a layoff. But this is a horse, first of all, we should mention there's not a lot of turf form in this particular race. So keep that in mind. This is one of the few horses that actually has legitimate turf form. Okay. I want you to go back and look at this horse's past performances. April of 2022, this horse started his career in 2 straight dirt maiden special weight races, then goes to the turf in April of 22, drops down in class to a maiden 40, goes on the turf, almost gets the job done. Finishes third by a half a length. Second place horse comes back to win next time out. He almost got the job done. What does he do after that? Goes to the bench, comes back about 2 months later, steps up into a main special weight now, 75,000, finishes second. We're moving in the right direction. Now, he still hasn't broken his maiden, but get this. Third time out, he runs in the New York Stallion Series. So runs a very distant eighth place that day, finishes last by 10 lengths, but is running an $150,000 stakes race without ever having broken his maiden. Then goes back down to the maiden ranks and is running in maiden special weights, finishing a little further back. Last time out, runs on the dirt again at this maiden claiming level. Here's the thing. He's getting back to the maiden claiming level on the turf for the first time since losing by a half length. He also is picking at Flavien Prat. Last couple of times he had Harkey aboard. Now we get Flavien Prat aboard. We're getting a big jockey upgrade here. This is a horse that makes a lot of sense at 5-1. Again, you got to look through the lines. You got to kind of look at things a little bit more, but he's getting back to the right level on the right surface. I like this play a lot in race number 7. Now, in terms of my value play, I like the number 10 horse, War Prince. I think this horse is actually a kind of a logical win contender in a lot of ways if he can carve out the right trip from being pretty far back. This is a horse that made his debut in state-restricted maiden special weight races on the turf. Didn't run huge that day, didn't run much at all that day. Finished 6th, but was well beaten by 12.5 lengths. It was a field of 10, so it was a decent-sized field. Then goes to the bench for the better part of 7 months. Comes back in what was supposed to be a turf race, but gets moved off the turf, sloppy sealed track, going 6 furlongs, and ends up running third, decent enough, in 10-horse field, and finishes third by 5.5 lengths. Not a bad effort. Now we're second back from that long layoff. Again, we're at the right level and on the right surface to suggest that this horse will have a little bit of a shot. Getting Lasix now for the second time, 12-1 on the morning line. Listen, the Rob Atras barn, when it gets hot, it can get really hot. You get Manny aboard. I'd expect this horse was going to maybe flash a little bit more speed than he did before with Manny aboard. I think this horse has a real shot at a pretty big price at 12-1 on the morning line. Well, let's move to race number 8 on the card, which is an allowance going 6 furlongs for $80,000 on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. And folks, I told you the prices were coming later in the card, and indeed they are. Listen, David Aragona is one of the best in the business and is, in my opinion, the best in the business at setting morning lines. That is why it is very difficult when you start doing capping the card, particularly for me, up in the New York tracks, because a lot of times he sets the morning lines exactly right. And you look at the races and you go, yeah, that favorite makes a ton of sense there. And you go, that second choice makes a lot of sense there. And that third choice makes a lot of sense there. And so it's hard to find horses that you go, that's like the 5th or 6th choice on the morning line, but I think this horse might win. It's rare to see that with the morning lines that David sets. In race 8, this just feels like a very wide open race where I'm willing to try to go against the favorites in this spot. 26 Black had a really big speed figure progression that I'm not sure is entirely real and might bounce back a little bit from. The number 6, Hey Mac, It's Jack, is just super up and down a little bit. And also, I don't know if this horse really wants 6 furlongs. This horse is kind of a 5 furlong specialist, it feels like. Did break its maiden at 6 furlongs, I know, but that was under a different trainer. Now you're in a different barn. Last time out wasn't bad. But again, if that was at 5 furlongs, interested to see what's going on there. And again, I just think, some of these other horses are all kind of right around the same level. And so I'm going to go to a horse that just showed up on the turf last time out in Starquist. And this is an angle that I've talked about plenty of times. There's a horse that is running in some state-restricted $72,000 allowance race last time out and runs a huge buyer speed figure. This horse had been running in the 50s and low 60s speed figures on the dirt. And by the way, we should be mentioned, has been running, broke his maiden first time out. So a debut maiden winner, goes directly to the Sleepy Hollow, then to the Notebook, and then the next 2 starts are at an optional claimer 50, and then at the Gander. So this horse has run in 3 stakes races in his 6-race career, has hit the board 4 out of 6 times. this is not a bad horse. This is a really nice horse who I think just found its right surface. I think they finally got this horse on the turf. You saw a huge perk up in the speed figures. This horse has class in terms of the competition he's been running against, which is quite frankly better than everybody else in this field. And you see a perk up on the numbers in terms of the buyer speed figures on the turf. I'm willing to use this horse as my top pick at 10-1 on the morning line. I just think you're getting upside. I always like playing second time on a new surface, particularly when I see a perk up or the first time on that surface, stepping up a little bit in class here, and you're getting a price. If this horse runs even halfway decent in this race and runs, let's say, second or third, you're never going to get 10-1 again on this horse. This horse will start getting bet down, and this horse will start being more 5-1, 6-1, 4-1 type of price. Getting 10-1, I'll take that all day and twice on Sunday. Although it's not Sunday, it's Saturday for these races, but I'll still take it. Now, in terms of my value play, I am going to take a step down a little bit with my value play for a horse from J.K. Sweezy with Joel Rosario aboard. Number 3, Power Attack at 8-1 on the morning line. A couple of things I like here. One, you're getting the best turf sprint jockey in the world in Joel Rosario. I'll always have confidence in Joel on turf sprint races. 2, much like Starquist, this is a horse, Power Attack, that has run against big time company. Last time out was in the Grade 3 Futurity. The race before this was in the Now. The race before that was in the Tyro. This is a horse that's run in 3 stakes competitions before as well. Hit the board in one of them. By the way, that was one of the sprints turf sprints that he hit the board in the Tyro. Finished second that day to Sharp as Attack. Ran against Web Slinger 2-back. Oh, what has Web Slinger done? Oh, nothing. Just win the American Turf Classic the other day. All right. And then runs in the Futurity against Nagarok, an absolute monster who goes on to finish third in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. So this horse has run against great competition. Listen, I know the speed figures aren't there in terms of what he's done to this point. Those were speed figures at 2 years old. Those are notoriously, I don't want to say unreliable, but very variable. This horse has been working lights out. You had an April 16th bullet, 4 furlong work. You just had a minute flat, 5 furlong work on April 30th as well. There's a lot to like about what this horse is doing. Sweezy coming back from the bench. I know he's not great off the layoff, but I just have a feeling this horse has just run against really good competition. You got a great jockey aboard, 1-for-1 winning at Belmont. This is where he broke his maiden. So I'm going to take a shot here with Power Attack as another price in the 8th race, I should say, which again is an $80,000 non-winners of 1, non-winners of 2, I should say, state bred race. So again, that state restricted race. I always like seeing horses that have some stakes competition in here, and a lot to like, I think, with these 2 prices. Let's go to race number 9 on the card, which is the final of the 3 graded stakes races. And it's the Grade 3 Run Happy Stakes, going 6 furlongs for 4-year-olds and up. And again, kind of going back a little bit to the favorites here. This is only a 6-horse field. There's not a ton of prices here, in my opinion. Some of the prices just don't really have much of a shot at all, in my opinion. So where am I going with my top pick? It might be predictable, but I'm going to go with the number 2 Baron, 5-2 in the morning line for Butch Reed and Irad Ortiz Jr. This horse doesn't really do anything wrong. 9 for 10 in the exacta at this distance. Granted, mostly at Parks, but here's the thing: is 2 for 2 winning at Belmont, and both of those were listed stakes races. Not a huge step up to a Grade 3 from that. He's honest. He gets Irad aboard, which I think you have to like in this particular spot, especially the horse that's going to have some early speed. So Irad's going to get this horse out there on the front end. Butch Reed, always a reliable trainer. And like I said, this horse has shipped out of Parks and done well. That's something I'm always skeptical of Parks horses when they ship out. I like looking at where has the form gone when they've shipped out of Parks. And so that's why I like Baron there quite a bit in this particular race. And is why I don't like the horse right next to him, Twisted Ride, at 9-2. That horse has run almost all of his career races at Parks. In fact, all but one. Ran 1 race at Delaware Park and promptly finished 5th. That is just an example of a horse that I just don't necessarily trust that form, even though he's a winner of 4 straight. And he's beaten horses like Uncle Ernie, who were pretty nice horses, lost to Repo Rocks 5-back. But I'm ultimately going to go with Baron, like I said here. And then for my value play, I'm going to go to Mr. Phil. Last weekend, I loved 2 Phils. Now I'm going to talk about Mr. Phil. Mr. Phil, 9-2 on the morning line for Rob Atras, Manny Franco aboard. Won first time back after a long layoff. and had gone from August 10th till April 20th without running, comes back in a $80,000 allowance optional claimer and wins that race, takes him wire to wire, and beats another runner in this race, actually stage left. Mr. Phil has run against excellent competition, has run against Jackie's Warrior, has run against horses like Jackson Traveler, has run against a horse like Repo Rocks before in Isolate, run against some really nice horses throughout his career. Atras, I would imagine second time back from that layoff, you're going to see another progression. This horse, when he is in top form, is capable of running huge figures. This horse has a 101 Beyer speed figure in his back pocket. This horse has races to run back to, even those races before that 101, 91 Beyer, 92 Beyer. The very honest horse, 6 for 9 in the exacta at Belmont with 3 wins, 10 for 20 in the money at this distance with 6 wins. So again, a lot of things to like about Mr. Phil at this distance, at this class. 9-2, you're not getting a huge price, but I just don't trust the really big price horses. I don't necessarily love stage left at 6-1. And I just am not really sold on drafted as well at 3-1. There just really aren't any big prices in this race, to be honest. Everybody's at, between basically 5-2 and 6-1 is the biggest spread that you have. So I'll use the second highest choice on the board, which is Mr. Phil at 9-2. Well, let's go to race number 10 on the card, $62,000 allowance optional claimer. And we're back on the turf going a mile and a 16th. And this is race for 3-year-old fillies. And I'll be honest, this could be a stakes race. This is an outstanding race. Has every right to be a stakes race. I'm going to be playing against the top 2 favorites in this race. The favorite is Get Your Kicks, which is a Chad Brown horse who ran a huge race last time out, which was first time on the turf, broke its maiden. Now going maiden against multiple time winners. What I don't love about both her and Spansive is the Todd Pletcher horse starting right next to her. I don't love that they both have outside post positions, and I both know what they're going to do, which is they're both going to go to the lead. They are both speed horses on the turf. Now, famous last words, you end up with a speed duel in New York on turf races, and it never materializes. And the worst part is you got Irad on one and Jose on the other. So are they really going to burn each other out? I don't know, but I just don't love that they're both first-time winners. They're both maidens now running against, they're not maidens anymore, but they both won their maidens, now are going against winners for the first time. They're going to be in the front end. I just don't necessarily trust this horse to take him gate to wire. I'm willing to play against that. I'm willing to use horses that are proven commodities at higher level races. So as a result, my top pick is going to be the number 3, Alpha Bella at 6-1. Another Todd Pletcher horse with Flavian Pratt aboard. This is a horse that has hit the board in the grade 3 Swedish Chant at the grade 3 Florida Oaks, and then admittedly did not have a great day and was not a huge presence in the grade 2 Appalachian last time out at Keeneland. This horse can do a mile and a 16th. There's no problem there. This horse, I think, has a nice turn of foot, can sit a few different types of trips, doesn't have to be far off the pace, has decent speed, but it has the ability to close, has lost against very good horses, lost, last time out in that Appalachian. You had Papilio, you had Cairo Consort. Oh, by the way, you had Heavenly Sunday, who we just saw win on Kentucky Oaks and Derby Day, take him gate to wire. So has been running against a very, very good class of horse. I'm going to use Alpha Bella at 6-1 in particular. That's the thing. If I had better prices on the Brown or Pletcher horse that are favored, maybe I consider them. At 6-1, I feel like Alpha Bella is a must-use in this spot. You get Pratt aboard here. Really like this horse quite a bit. And then from a value standpoint, I'll use number 10, Juniper's Moon, 8-1. Listen, came out of that same Florida Oaks race and finished third that day, right behind Mission of Joy and Alpha Bella. So was not far off, was only 3/4 of a length, or was, I guess, about 2 lengths behind, I should say, Alpha Bella. But still, you see a progression from the speed figure. 67 the first time on the turf, 70 when it broke its maiden, 75 last time out. There's a continued progression here. Also, the horse did take him on the lead the first time out, is probably not going to be fast enough to get to the lead in this race. I actually think that's for its benefit. I think she'll probably sit second or third and then make a move late. But listen, sired from Galileo, there's a lot of good turf pedigree here. Javier Castellano aboard. I also love this horse got a really nice crisp 48-3 4 furlong workout over the Belmont turf on May 7th. Always like horses that get works on the turf they're running on. It might seem like a silly angle, but it's one that I like using more often than not. Honestly, I really like using it down at Gulfstream Park, and I like to see horses that train on the synthetic and then run on the synthetic. That's always an angle I like. But I like it with the turf too, just to see how those works look when they go on the turf, and do they look a little bit better when they're on the turf versus on the dirt. And that was certainly the case there with Juniper's Moon. So those are going to be my 2 plays in race number 10. Well, let's go out to the Bailout race, which is another maiden claimer, $40,000, going 6 furlongs on the turf for 3-year-old fillies. And this is a state restricted race as well. And we are going to the number 4 horse, George's Vice, 7-2 on the morning line for trainer Christophe Clement with Joel Rosario aboard. And why am I going with George's Vice? Well, there's a few reasons. One, this is a horse that actually ran in an open company maiden special weight race in debut down at Gulfstream Park on March 23rd. Ran against a horse, My Sweet Affair, pretty nice horse actually. Was well beaten that day. But now we're going against state bred company. We're going in a restricted race, and we're dropping down in class. This is a very plus move for Clement. Clement does extremely well moving from maiden special weights down to maiden claimers, 35% over the last year. But even if you start putting qualifications on it, listen, he's 30% with this move on the turf in New York. So this is a move that is tried and true for him, no matter how you want to splice the numbers. This horse also, quite frankly, just seems to have really good turf pedigree, and would suggest that this horse will handle this surface better second time out. I think there's a lot to like here. I think a very deserving favorite with Joel Rosario aboard on this particular horse. I will say, I think the 3 horse Follow the Fed at 12-1 is a little bit interesting for Rudy Rodriguez. This horse had a huge speed figure first time out, but then got moved to the dirt and hasn't really run well since then for Rudy Rod. Now we're going back to the turf. I'm just worried there's been a lot of really bad efforts the last 4 or 5 times out. And I just worry if that kind of damages the horse's psyche a little bit, and whether or not it's just as automatic as coming back and getting on the right surface. I just don't know. But would I be shocked to Follow the Fed hit the board? No, but I'm not going to use that horse in this particular spot. Instead, I'm going to go to the number 6, Irish Empress, 8-1 on the morning line for Natalia Lynch with Jose Torres aboard. Listen, I really like this horse a lot. This is a horse that actually has a somewhat of a similar profile to Follow the Fed, the number 3 horse I just outlined. But here's the thing. This horse debuts on dirt in a state restricted maiden special weight race, $88,000. Doesn't run a lick. Then goes to on the turf, same level, maiden special weight, 88,000. Runs 4th by 4.5 lengths. Much, much better. Second place horse comes back to win next time out. Hasn't been on the turf since. Hasn't run terribly the last 2 times out. Actually finished 3rd the last 2 races on the dirt. Is coming back from a pretty extensive layoff. Hasn't run since December 2nd. Blinkers are coming off. Lasix coming on. So getting Lasix for the first time. Getting a weight allowance with the bug aboard and Jose Torres. There's just a lot to like there. And if this horse can replicate what it did at Saratoga on August 12th, or even get close to it, I think you're going to get a really nice effort from this horse, who should be sitting mid-pack, but does have some versatility, does flash a little bit of speed, much like some of the horses I talked about in the first maiden claiming race. This is the first time this horse is getting back on the turf in the maiden claiming ranks. So I think, again, we're getting this horse on the right surface, and we're getting this horse at the right level. Now you're taking the blinkers off, and you're adding Lasix, and you get a 5-pound weight allowance. These are all things that equal up to, like I said, a full makeover package. Always love giving out those types of horses. 8-1 on the morning line for Irish Empress. All right, folks. Well, that will do it for today's Cap in the Card. Thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Hope you guys cash some tickets this weekend at Belmont. Make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to get all of our great content on Trust the Profits. Make sure to throw me a follow on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Like this video and comment below with who you like as your best bet on Man of War Stakes Day at Belmont Park. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you it's now post time.